Good afternoon. It's Friday afternoon, the 11th day of December. It's trying to snow here in Utah. When I went for my walk this morning, it was trying to snow a little bit, but didn't get there. And then earlier it was a little bit, and it's just not quite doing it. But it's supposed to come. It's in the forecast. But today we are reading Christmas story number 11, and it is called The Crippled Lamb. You know, when Jesus was born, he was born in a stable where the cows and the sheep were. So it seems fitting that there might be a little lamb in the barn or the stable where the baby Jesus was born. So let's find out about the crippled little lamb. And if you've ever been around sheep, they just keep together. They like to gather together and stick together. Sometimes one will get lost, and then it takes a while to find them. So let's find out about this little lamb. Once upon a time, in a sunny valley, there lived a little lamb named Joshua. He was white with black spots and black feet and sad eyes. Josh felt sad when he saw the other lambs with snow white wool and no spots. He felt sad when he saw the other sheep with their moms and dads because he didn't have a mom or a dad. But he felt saddest when he saw the other lambs running and jumping because he couldn't. Josh had been born with one leg that didn't work right. He was crippled. He always limped when he walked. And that's what it means to be crippled, that you can't walk like everyone else. You kind of struggle. Sometimes you might drag your foot, or sometimes you have to have a limp like he did. So let's find out what Joshua the lamb did. That's why he always watched while the other lambs ran and played. Josh felt sad and alone, except when Abigail was around. Who was Abigail? Abigail was Josh's best friend. She didn't look like a friend for a lamb. She was an old cow. Oh my goodness, a cow would be much bigger than a lamb, wouldn't she? She was brown with white blotches that looked like rain puddles on a path. Her belly was round as a barrel, and her voice was always kind and friendly. Do you see Abigail's spots all over her body? She's brown with spots. Some of Josh's favorite hours were spent with Abigail. I like the name Abigail. They loved to pretend they were on an adventure in distant lands, and Josh liked to listen to Abigail tell stories about the stars, because there they are, out in the night with the stars. They would spend hours on the hill looking into the valley. They were good friends, but even with a friend like Abigail, Josh still got sad. It made him sad to be the only lamb that could not run and jump. Because you know what? Lambs like to run and jump. That's their favorite thing to do. And they like to play in the grass. That's when Abigail would turn to him and say, "Don't be sad, little Joshua. God has a special place for those who feel left out." I wonder what that special spot is. Josh wanted to believe her, but it was hard. Some days he felt alone. He really felt alone the day the shepherds decided to take lambs to the next valley where there was more grass The sheep had been in this valley so long that the ground was nearly bare. So there goes the shepherds moving the sheep to better grass so they would have lots to eat. All the sheep were excited when the shepherd told them they were going to a new meadow, because then they could play in the meadow and they could run and jump and eat all the grass that they wanted. As they prepared to leave, Josh hobbled over and took his place on the edge of the group. But the others started laughing at him. "You're too slow to go all the way to the next valley. Go back, slowpoke. We'll never get there if we have to wait on you. Go back, Joshua." Now, was that very nice and very kind of them to say such mean things to poor Joshua? What would you do if you had a friend that couldn't move quite as fast as you, and they were slower, or they didn't understand quite as much as you do? Maybe we should think about that. Were these sheep being kind to their little friend Joshua? Not really. We need to be loving and kind. That's when Josh looked up and saw the shepherd standing in front of him. "They are right, my little Joshua. You better go back. This trip is too long for you. Go and spend the night in the stable." Josh looked at the man for a long time. Then he turned slowly and began limping away. Oh, that is so sad and so hard for Josh that he's going to have to stay when everyone else gets to go. And then comes Abigail. When Josh got to the top of the hill, he looked down and saw all the other sheep headed toward the green grass. Never before had he felt so left out. A big tear slipped out of his eye, rolled down his nose, and fell on a rock. Just then he heard Abigail. Abigail came behind him, and Abigail said what she always said when Josh felt sad. "Don't be sad, little Joshua. God has a special place for those who feel left out." Slowly, the two friends turned and walked into the stable together. And there goes the shepherd with all the sheep, and poor little Joshua is staying with Abigail in the stable at the barn. By the time they got to the little barn, the sun was setting like a big orange ball. Josh and Abigail went inside and began to eat some hay left out in the feed box. They were very hungry, and the hay tasted very good. For a little while, Joshua forgot that he had been left behind. "Go to sleep, little friend," Abigail said after they finished eating. "You've had a hard day." Josh was tired, so he lay down in the corner on some straw and closed his eyes. He felt Abigail lie down beside him, and he was glad to have Abigail as his friend, because, oh my goodness, all the other sheep had left him, and they didn't want him to come, and none of them wanted to stay with little Joshua. Soon, Joshua was asleep. At first, he slept soundly, curled up against Abigail's back, and in his sleep he dreamed. He dreamed of running and jumping, just like all the other sheep. He dreamed of long walks with Abigail through the valley. He dreamed of being in a place where he never felt left out again. And suddenly, strange noises woke him up. What could those noises be? There he is, awake, laying beside Abigail. "Abigail," he whispered, "wake up. I'm scared." Abigail lifted her big head and looked around. The stable was dark, except for a small lamp hanging on the wall. "Somebody is in here," Josh whispered. They looked across the dimly lit stable. There, lying on some fresh hay in the feed box, was a baby. A young woman was resting on a big pile of hay beside the feed box. Joshua looked at Abigail, thinking his friend could tell him what was going on. But Abigail was just as surprised as Joshua. "And there is the woman laying beside the feed box. And there's a baby in the feed box. I wonder who that baby is." Josh looked again at the woman and the child, then limped across the stable. He stopped next to the mother and looked into the baby's face. The baby was crying. He was cold. The woman picked up the baby and put him on the hay next to her. Josh looked around the stable for something to keep the baby warm. As usually, there were blankets, but not tonight. The shepherds had taken them on their trip across the valley. So this poor little baby is cold and he's laying there with his mom. So who is that baby? And who is that mom? I bet you know. Then Josh remembered his own soft, warm wool. Timidly, he walked over and curled up close to the baby. "Thank you, little lamb," the baby's mother said softly. And soon the little child stopped crying and went back to sleep. About that time, a man entered the stable carrying some rags. "I'm sorry, Mary," he explained. "This is all I could come up with and could find." "It's okay," she answered. "This little lamb has kept the new king warm." "A king?" Joshua looked at the baby and wondered who he might be. "His name is Jesus," Mary spoke as if she knew Joshua's question. "God's son. He came from heaven to teach us about God." Excuse me. So there is Joseph bringing the little rags or the swaddling cloths that we've learned of before, and there's Mary and the baby Jesus, with Joshua laying right there beside the baby Jesus, giving him all the warmth he can from his wool. Just then, there was another noise at the door. It was the shepherds, the ones who had left Joshua behind. Their eyes were big, and they were excited. "We saw a bright light and heard the angels," they began. And then they saw Joshua next to the baby. "Joshua, do you know who this baby is?" "He does now." It was the young mother who was speaking. She looked at Joshua and smiled. "God has heard your prayers, little lamb. This little baby is the answer to your prayers." There's the shepherds coming in, shocked that little Joshua, the crippled little lamb, would be lying beside this king, this little baby Jesus, and giving him warmth. Joshua looked down at the baby. Somehow he knew that this was a special baby, and this was a special moment. He also understood why he had been born with a crippled leg. Had he been like the other sheep, he would have been in the valley. But since he was different, he was in the stable, among the first to welcome the baby Jesus into the world. He had a special plan. Heavenly Father knew of his special plan. And so he turned and walked back to Abigail and took his place beside his friend. "You were right," he told her. "God does have a special place for me." And there's little Joshua with Abigail after he gave the baby Jesus the warmth of his wool. And that's what we can do. We can help those that are different than us. We can love them anyway. We can do things when they need help. And that's what we need to be reminded of at Christmas, of the crippled lamb, and being like the crippled lamb, we can do something even when we don't think we can. Our Heavenly Father knows us, and He will bless us, and He will guide us and give us the abilities that we need, just like He did Joshua, being able to be there for the baby Jesus to give him warmth. So that's my Christmas story today, is the little crippled lamb. And I hope you have a good evening, and tomorrow we will bring another story, and it's about a train, another train. And I'm excited because I may not be here in my room to do it. I might be elsewhere, and I might do a special reading just for you on day 12 of our Christmas stories, because tomorrow we'll be halfway there. We're only halfway, not even quite today, but tomorrow we will. So have a good evening, and thanks for joining, and we'll see you soon. Mwah.